Okay, Surya, it's not 26%. You have to add 10% because there's a base tariff already in place. So you're looking at 36%. And what India should do, but before that, I hope India does not retaliate and takes it in the chin, as it were, because this tariff will not impact India so much as it would affect other countries. Our trade basket with the US is about $125 billion. India exports about 85 billion. So we're talking about 45 billion from the US. And we get a trade surplus of about $40 billion. The primary chunk of this is pharmaceuticals and auto. So pharmaceuticals is definitely exempt. Auto is not. Auto we should watch for. So it's not something that's going to have a dramatic impact.
Welcome to StratNewsGlobal. I'm Surya Gangadharan. You're on the gist, and my guest is Anil Padmanabhan, former managing editor of The Mint, and currently running his own capital calculus on Substack. And we're going to talk about Liberation Day, Trump's announcement of tariffs on India. Anil, your quick reaction on the tariffs.
Surya, I would say two things. One, globalization has formally ended, which has now been signaled. We all knew all along. And second, the United States has formally declared China as its primary adversary, because if you look at the tariff schedule, it's China is obviously the worst affected, along with wherever the Chinese shadow falls, which is basically using these countries to source products to the world. Vietnam is one example, though it has some of its own, but a lot of it is mingled with China. Then Cambodia, Mexico. So whichever way we look at it, China is front and center of the statement that came out of White House today. So I would say these two things, and it's a tough time for the global economy.
And how badly is this going to hit us?
You mean India?
Yeah.
Okay, India, the people have done the math on it even before these tariffs were announced, but they worked the tariff and various scenarios. So the math varies that it will impact India's GDP from anywhere between 0.4% to 0.7%, which means about 0.5% of GDP. So if you're expecting to grow at 6.5, you could have a 6.5 lopped off, but it doesn't work so linearly ever, growth. So, but we do know that the impact is not going to be as severe for us, unlike, say, other countries.
So, in this situation of 26% tariffs, what does India do? What's the best way forward?
Okay, Surya, it's not 26%. You have to add 10% because there's a base tariff already in place. So you're looking at 36%. And what India should do, but before that, I hope India does not retaliate and takes it in the chin, as it were, because this tariff will not impact India so much as it would affect other countries. Our trade basket with the US is about $125 billion. India exports about 85 billion. So we're talking about 45 billion from the US. And we get a trade surplus of about $40 billion. The primary chunk of this is pharmaceuticals and auto. So pharmaceuticals is definitely exempt. Auto is not. Auto we should watch for. So it's not something that's going to have a dramatic impact. And analysts have done the math. They're saying anywhere between 0.4 to 0.7% of GDP growth, which means if you're growing at 6.5, you're talking about 6% growth. But let me caveat this that it's never so linear. And what India should do is to, besides taking it in the chin, is to step up its action to shore up the domestic economy. Indian industry is among the most uncompetitive in the world, and this hurts India. If you ask why, well, we had a legacy of license Raj till about 91, and post that we had a phase of crony capitalism. So, and whatever it is, Indian industry has been protected. So India has to get its act right, improve its competitiveness. There's a range of things it can do and it should do.
Yeah. And I want to come to that, Anil. You wrote in the Economic Times about a short, sweet negative list. Can you explain?
Okay, Surya, the thing is, like I said, do not retaliate. Instead, also do not expend your precious social capital in negotiating tariff reductions across the board. You need a priority list. And that priority list, I would put agriculture right up there, which is one of the areas the Americans are very clearly interested.
Yeah.
But India should not, under any circumstance, allow agriculture to be brought into this trade war because they are not apples. We are not trading apples here. American agri is severely subsidized, and Indian agri will not be able to stand up to the onslaught. So it's important that Indian agriculture is showed. Also, it's the biggest employer. 52% of our workforce is in agriculture. It's a question of supplying food to this country. India has a legacy of food challenges in the 60s and American misdemeanors at that point of time with PL 480. So there's a long history about worrying about food. So
Yeah.
agriculture is one sector they should protect. But I wouldn't expend my social capital protecting all industries. So some of them should be let go and they have to compete or perish. But that is what I meant when I said keep a short list and fight it to the last breath.
So, apart from agriculture and pharma, any other that you feel we should protect?
See, we have to protect our services and rather more than protect, incentivize India's service exports because they will all become targets. And India has to also make sure that we do not get subjected to the American IPR regime. They use
Hmm.
IPRs very effectively to create market access for their
Yeah.
companies and their commodities. So India has to be smart enough to dodge these bullets. How they do it is their problem, but they should do it. So watch out for all these IEDs that will come our way. But
Hmm.
the thing is that India is negotiating a bilateral trade agreement with the Americans. So a lot of this will get subsumed into that. And the broad architecture is expected to be ready by probably September, but the deal won't be done. And that's probably the time President Trump may visit India for the deliberations here. And
Mhm.
so if that happens, great. But if the architecture is in place, a lot of these issues will get resolved by then.
Okay. You've also mentioned in your piece in the Economic Times about making MSMEs great again.
Oh, absolutely. See, uh, Surya, the one thing we do in this country is pay glorious lip service to the small scale sector.
Yeah.
Politicians, analysts, journalists, name them. Everybody will sing hosannas about the small scale sector without ever doing anything for them. With, and this is despite the fact that the small scale sector accounts for 60% of employment, about 40% of GDP, and about 45% of exports. So they are a serious economic entity, yet they've never got their due. So one big challenge they face is access to formal sources of finance, which is what makes or breaks them. It would depend on informal sources. So if to give you an example, in formal source, they got a working capital loan, it'll be somewhere between 7-11%, depending on various risk factors. But if they went to informal, the starting is 30%. So,
Mhm.
the odds are so severely stacked with them in finance. Secondly, the red tape and harassment. Every industry and every business suffers it, but they come into their own vis-a-vis the small scale sector because they get hit from both sides, the union government as well as the state government. So
Mhm.
you have to walk the talk on at least these two things, and of course, give a focus in the cabinet which is not there today. I mean, you look at our union cabinet. Do you know who's your small scale sector minister? No. But if I
Yeah.
asked you, do you know who's your finance minister? You'll say yes. Do I say
Yeah.
commerce minister? You would say yes. So that's what I mean. So there is zero profile in government. You need to acknowledge it, give them profile. I would say come up with a special package in this context of what Trump has done. Say this is what we are doing, like we did a COVID-19 package. Nothing prevents this government from doing it. But
Yeah.
walk the talk on small scale sector. You're done with talking the talk.
You also mentioned here about domestic investors, giving them enough space and field for investment.
See, Surya, the same thing. You treat foreign investors with kids' gloves. I know why. Let's take the American example because we are in the crosshairs of their target practice. If an American company falls foul of some Indian regulation here, like say recently Samsung was slapped with a huge tax,
Yeah,
dues. If it was an American company, they would definitely call up, or not officially but unofficially, they wouldn't make a press statement out of it, but they would definitely call up, or if push comes to shove, the White House will make a statement at their daily press briefing that India has not done right. I mean, they are making statements on anything and everything about India.
yeah,
It has come down since the end of the Biden administration, but you know what I mean. But for Indian industry, if they suffer the same, say, crisis with a wrongful tax claim, what is their recourse? They have to go to government, or they have to go to courts. They're tossed around all over the place. My point is, give them both the same treatment. I'm not saying ill treat your foreign investor. I'm saying treat your domestic investor as well, and stop differentiating between big and small. Just treat all investors alike. If they're foreign, domestic, they're small, they're large, doesn't matter. Give them all their fair due.
finally, you mentioned BTA the blues away. Now, you mentioned this a little earlier. I was just wondering, there's a huge asymmetry between the US and India, and we're taking part in a bilateral trade dialogue. Isn't that kind of, puts us at a disadvantage, doesn't it?
Surya, in an ideal world, yes, but we do not live in an ideal world. So let's look at the previous regime which existed before this, which is the multilateral trade framework, which is captured by the World Trade Organization, an organization which has been run into the ground by beginning with President Obama, not uh, President Trump, as
Yeah,
most people believe. So it has been, it's got a slow death, and they've fixed it. Basically, they have uh, hobbled the World Trade Organization and hobbled the multilateral trade framework. Now, India didn't have a choice then. Okay, so you have to operate within these guardrails. Now, America, and please understand, they're a $29 trillion economy. They are
yeah,
the largest economy in the world. They have they have the wherewithal to go unilateral. Now they decide they are moving to a bilateral trade framework because the multilateral trade framework got hijacked by the Chinese, and they hollowed out America's economy. The
yeah,
Americans woke up late, but now they have begun this rearguard action. So India has no choice. You have to accept the field you're given in. It's like you're playing an IPL tournament and you can't decide which pitch you will play on. That pitch is decided by the host, right? So you'll play on whichever pitch and both of you get an equal say. So the Americans, in this case, you don't get an equal say. The Americans decide the pitch, they decide the terms. So which means you're fighting defense, which is what I'm saying. Do not do that. Why should India be only defensive?
yeah.
The way to be offensive is, if your domestic economy is in fantastic shape, then nobody can take you on, right? So you have to get the domestic economy competitive, then bring on the tariffs. It doesn't matter. But you can't have a non-competitive domestic industry and then take on American or other exports coming into India. So you need to shore up your domestic economy. The best defense is a domestic economy, and for that we have to begin yesterday and not today.
Million dollar question about reform. What do we need to reform? Bureaucracy, obviously. I think that's a big job waiting to be done.
See, the checklist for reforms are infinite.
Mm.
Please remember that India is a country which is coming new to reforms. I think 1980 was the turning point, and
Yeah,
it has accelerated since 91. And of course, more recently, more structural reforms like GST and the bank assets, to bad assets, to the laws to solve that. So these are all new territory for India. So it's a learning curve. But my point is that while you go down this path, make sure the reforms you do are, they are oiled and well maintained. Let's take GST for example. Fantastic move. I think the it has crossed all expectations. But The Babugiri has come back. Red
Mm.
tape has come back, center and state level. The harassments have begun, tax notices have begun. So all the sweetheart deals have started. Now, that is something which GST was meant to preclude. Now, you need to go back and fix that. Second, I would say judicial reform in this country is long, long overdue. I mean, forget the judge scandal. The number of cases is choking India's
Yeah.
development process, India's judicial structure from top to bottom. It's not just judges, the lawyers, the schools, everything is wrong. I think it's high time it was reset. If you can reset our education system, which has now become like state of the art, you can certainly do that to the judicial system. So the checklists for reforms are infinite, but you need to prioritize them and you need to calibrate them. And that has to be politically also managed. And for that, I think this Prime Minister has done a very good job so far. He has literally made us bite the bullet on things like GST and, of course, demonetization and all these
Yeah.
things. And he still stayed in power. So the best man for the job is our Prime Minister.
You think we can do it? This government has the political will despite lower numbers in parliament?
No, numbers is not the problem, Surya. They have the numbers. That was over after, I think, probably by July end. That problem was
Mm.
sorted. So
Mm.
this coalition is firmly in place. I don't think anything will unsettle them. The thing is that you need to have the political will to do it, and you need to recognize the challenge. In closing, I would only say that India has always done well in a crisis. So 1980, we had a crisis. India took an IMF loan, rebounded, did very well. 91, we had that major crisis. India rebounded, did well. More recently, I'm cutting to the chase. COVID-19 happened.
Yeah.
Russia-Ukraine crisis happened. Never in the history of the world have you seen back-to-back economic shocks, once-in-century events happening with such frequency and impact. India survived them all, rebounded, and actually thrived. So we do very well in a crisis. So treat this as another crisis. It is a crisis, especially to the global economy. So treat it as a crisis and get your act right is what I would say. So if there is a moment to do it, it's now.
Great talking to you, Anil. Let's hope government sums the political will to push ahead with reforms. As you said, they are long-standing. Thank you very much. Great talking to you.
Thank you, Surya.
That's all we have for you on this edition of The Gist. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media. Thank you very much. Good day.